When it comes to his resume, Mauricio Pochettino is the most qualified coach the US men's national team has ever had. Probably the best one. Now, is that a guarantee of success? No, it is not. But so far, are we off to a good start under Pochettino? Yes, absolutely we are. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it, right? The first camp in October was rough, but it was his first camp in charge and we were missing like 15 players that were quite important. But the last one, this November, we defeated Jamaica 5-2 on aggregate for the CONCACAF Nations League quarterfinals. It was quite good. There was a ton of progress in terms of how we play, along with two very good results. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but it was quite encouraging. So let's talk about it. Hello. If you are new here, I'm Filippo and welcome to Tactical Manager TV. And today we have part one of a two-part interview with Herc Gomez. And you can find Herc Gomez on Fútbol Americas at ESPN Plus or at the Vamos podcast with Men in Blazers. And today's episode, we're going to be talking with Herc about the first two camps under Pochettino. If there was any progress, if there are enough reasons for us US men's national team fans to be optimistic, and much more. Now, episode 2 will be out roughly 2 days after this one, and we're going to be addressing if it's better to have a foreign coach or an American coach in charge of the US men's national team, while also talking about Tim Howard's very harsh comments on Jurgen Klinsmann. I mean, Herc worked with Jurgen and Bob Bradley, so we're going to get his take on that. Now sit back, relax, and please drop a like in this video because it helps the channel quite a bit, and I will not be requesting during the interview, so just do it right now. And let me know in the comment section down below. On a scale from 1 to 10, with 5 being average, how do you rate Mauricio Pochettino's era in charge of the US men's national team so far? I know it's very recent, it just started, but I mean, we've had 2 camps, we had 4 games, so you can rate it, okay? Let's begin. Okay, everyone, welcome back, and welcome back, Herc. And Herc, before we even start, I'll say this. You got one of Palmeiras' rivals' jersey right there, but I will accept that. Santos is a legendary team, the team of Pele, the team of Neymar.
Edu. No, that's Vasco da Gama. I'm sorry.
Vasco. But Santos, I actually like Vasco too quite a bit. They have a
I like Vasco a lot. They got some sick kits back in the day, those Kappas. But Santos, thank you to the good people at Umbro for the little gift here. They do a good job of like these crazy teams that aren't. I mean, Santos is popular, but that aren't very mainstream here in the States, if you will. They sent me some FAS and Aguila and El Salvador and some other things, but it's good stuff, man. I like the little pinstripe. It goes well.
They sent me a Nacional jersey, which was beautiful, from Uruguay.
Uruguay, okay, because there's Colombia Nacional. There's a bunch of Nacionales.
Yeah, Colombia's Atlético Nacional. Uruguay is just Nacional. That's the one they sent me, which is a beautiful jersey. And then they sent me Fluminense, and I'm like, I can't wear that. I'm gonna get lit up in the Brazilian group chat, so I had to give it to my mom because she's a Fluminense fan. But that was also
no. Wait, so Fluminense, Palmeiras, and you got some issues, bro.
Fluminense and Palmeiras are not rivals, but I lived a few years in Rio, so a lot of my friends are Fluminense fans.
Okay.
So I have that. It's very weird. Like, I have more beef with Fluminense and Flamengo than like Santos, São Paulo, and Corinthians. But Herc, let's talk about Pochettino so far with the U.S. men's national team, right? We had a very rough summer with the United States men's national team. And then after that, we also had 2 windows that weren't very good. The September one under interim coach Mikey Varas. And then we had the October camp with Pochettino. It was his first one, and he was missing like 15 players. But let's be real, it wasn't a great camp. We had a decent performance against Panama. And then against Mexico, we got completely outplayed. Mexico deserved that win. But then we come into this October camp, and things started to look better. Not just away, but at home. Not a perfect camp, but a good camp. My first question to you is this. Berhalter was rehired 2023.
Correct.
When that happened, a lot of us were skeptical, I think including yourself, right? I don't want to speak for you, but we're skeptical. But there was still some hope that we'll be okay in the 2026 World Cup. Like, there's some level of optimism. Things didn't go well. My question to you right now is, after everything that happened poorly, and then Pochettino still being a question mark, even though it seems like things are getting back on track. Are you more optimistic than before we rehired Berhalter? Like when right before that 2023 summer, were you more optimistic back then than you are now, or did it change?
Absolutely not. It completely changed. Listen, I was of the camp of the idea that rehiring Greg Berhalter was bad for business, was not the right move. And you can go back and look at my history with Football Americas and other things I've done. I was adamant. It's just a bad move going forward because of everything that happened at the World Cup, the aftermath of Giovanni Reina and the Reinas. I just felt there was too much water on the bridge, and that maybe they had gone as far as they could go with Greg Berhalter. And Greg did a lot of good things for this program. Let's not shy away from that. There are a lot of people that would love to shit on Greg, but Greg did a lot of good things. But that part of the U.S. men's national team's, history with them, that chapter, that was closed, and it should have been closed. And the way he was rehired, the way you found out about it 5 minutes before a Nations League versus Mexico, all these different things, it just started out the bad way. And there's a saying in Spanish, lo que comienza mal termina mal. What starts out bad will end up bad. And that's what it was. It took a disastrous summer, Copa America, and quite frankly, I would say a lot of proof, a lot of body of work to show you that this team had regressed. And I don't want to hash out the past, but you could see the previous interns and just how different the team was with a different voice, and then things that had been happening when Greg was around. So it was just good to see this team move forward. But I think the main argument for a lot of people was the pool could be better with a different voice, with a more experienced coach of a different caliber. So there was room for optimism, going into hiring a coach like Mauricio Pochettino, who quite frankly was out of the U.S. men's national team's league for quite some time until he wasn't. So now to see a coach with a certain pedigree come here with this camp, and I understand last camp wasn't a great camp, but you also have to understand the context behind it. I mean, there are arguably 8 starters missing in that camp.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you consider Fowler Balogun a starter, or Josh Sargent a starter, or Haji Wright a starter.
But you don't consider him a starter?
Well, I don't think there's any 9 right now that is a starter. I think if you're going to tell me that Fowler Balogun's the better 9 out of all these 9s, you're just speaking out of the side of your mouth, because he's not done it for the U.S. men's national team. He scored 1 goal in 1 tournament, and there's been no 9 to kind of take that helm, to be like, this is mine. And we'll get into Ricardo Pepi in a second. But
yeah, I'll talk about Balogun again. But
but so their starters missing there. Then you've got Giovanni Reina missing. You had Weston McKennie missing. You had Serginho Dest missing. Chris Richards missing. Insert name here. There are arguably 8 starters missing in this camp. So things don't go that great against Panama. You get a result. Fine. I think it's an expected result. But then you lose to this version of Mexico, albeit in Mexico. You've only won once in Mexico, but it's the way you go about it, the way you lose, and sort of the aftermath of it. You leave Christian Pulisic at home. You tell him to go back to Milan. You're sending, if you're Mauricio Pochettino, some messages like maybe this game versus Mexico isn't as important. So it's the fan base is a little bit confused, if you will.
Has
so
Casey
coming in,
Keller recovered from that? He was
Casey's doing better. Casey's doing better. And I will say this, like, to Casey's credit, like, you give somebody $6 million, you want to see $6 million worth, right? And so that makes sense. And we'll get into this camp, but the optimism is there, because let's say versus Panama, you saw certain patterns of play that made you think, oh, this is interesting. Anthony Robinson pushed up high. Yunus Musa on the right-hand side, tucking in to be an interior or part of that 5-man back line. Joe Scally oftentimes as a third center back. You saw things like Christian Pulisic, even though he starts out on the left, being very fluid in his movement and having free reign to go into the midfield, free reign to go on the right-hand side. You saw certain patterns in play that made you think, okay, there's a work in progress here. And then the Mexico game happens. You're like, well, and in this camp, and what I would say is a very difficult way to start out away against Jamaica. And listen, you can say what you want about Jamaica, and Jamaica's an enigma, probably the biggest enigma in CONCACAF. All that talent on paper, and can never and have never put it together, and may never put it together. And that should be very frustrating if you're a Jamaica fan. But certainly on paper, formidable opponent, players that you would say like, damn, a bit of pedigree on these players. How are all these players assembled on a Caribbean nation in CONCACAF, if you will? For my money, the fourth best pool in CONCACAF, and they should automatically qualify for the World Cup. But if you think about it, they probably are in jeopardy of qualifying for the World Cup, because when they play together, when they are together, Steve McLaren's group, whether Steve McLaren or the names of the past, they've not been able to fulfill, that capacity, that level. Take a look at a Leon Bailey, for example, who's never really been that player for Jamaica, yet ridiculous years at Leverkusen, amazing last season at Aston Villa, where he was last season. I'd say he had the best year for a CONCACAF player, double-digit goals and assists, and in the Premier League, now a Champions League team. So all these different things where you're like, I don't understand, why don't they put it together? It's going to be a formidable test. And they weather the storm. Mauricio Pochettino's team weather the storm. They get a great early goal, perfectly weighted ball from Christian Pulisic, where he splits two defenders, commits a defender, puts it right in the path of Ricardo Pepe. Ricardo, with the confidence that he has right now, doesn't hit it well, but puts it on target, and it ends up going to the back of the net. And you start thinking, this is interesting. This is something you can build on. Anthony Robinson has a beautiful chance shortly after. Again, Christian Pulisic, the provider, gets caught in between his feet. He can't finish it off, and you're thinking, that's the one you got to finish. That's the one you got to score. You got to put away to just put this team away. You've got to, when you've got your foot on their throat, step on it type of deal. You can't leave a team like Jamaica laying around. And then you see certain errors. You see certain things. You're like, oh no, like skeletons in the closet. The past is coming back to catch up to you. You see Joe Scally, a bad giveaway, and then you see Tim Ream get absolutely spun, not once but twice. And you see Mark McKenzie not anticipate that there could be some misfortune there. And I don't know how he doesn't just clear it. It goes through him. And then you see Matt Turner, and Casey Keller said this on the Football America broadcast. He's not worried about the shot stopping. Like, that's second nature to a goalkeeper. But when you don't play, he's worried about, for Matt Turner, the decision making. And he takes down Nicholson in what was in a very acute angle. Maybe you didn't have to come out and challenge for that. It's going to be on his left, and it's an acute angle. And if you stand your ground, the ball's not going to go past you. He makes a bad decision, penalty kick. Damari Gray steps up, and to Matt Turner's credit, he does what Matt Turner's usually done in these penalty kicks. He responds. He blocks that penalty kick. But you got to think, you just gave up a penalty kick away from home. That's 1-1, right? And in the second half, man, it's just a drop in intensity, a drop in concentration, a drop in confidence. And you have to give credit to Steve McLaren and what he did in that midfield, a bunch of changes, and how it's not like the U.S. sat back. I think Jamaica pinned the U.S. back. And as they're being pinned back, they're absorbing all this pressure. They had like 3 back-to-back opportunities on set pieces and chances, and balls going through, the back line being put in pressure and now facing their own goal, running at Matt Turner, where there's an opportunity where I believe it's the corner kick for Jamaica, almost Olympico. Matt Turner commits too much, has to make a good save. And in that process, Tim Ream blocks a shot with what looked like his arm, throws that chicken wing out there. And I don't think there's a person here that would argue if it was called a penalty kick. They'd have a big argument like, no, that's not a penalty kick. It sure looked like he was guilty. So now you have a situation where they miss a penalty kick, okay, after your bad turnovers. They have constant pressure on you. They have an opportunity on goal, and then a legit claim for a penalty kick. And yet you still get out of there with the win. Good teams find a way to win, which is what the U.S. men's national team did in the first game. Whether we think it was fortunate or not, it's a win. And a win that will equal already last 10 years away record in CONCACAF. So take that for what it's worth. That's game 1. So is there optimism?
Herc, can I add one context to that too?
Sure.
if we go back 6 months, we played a Jamaican side, the same Jamaican side, because they were also missing Bailey, they were missing Antonio, they were missing Pinnock, and we played them at home, and we got a lucky own
Corey
goal at the,
Burke.
yeah, 96th, 95th minute to go to
Correct.
extra time, and then in extra time, Gio and Haji off the bench decided the game. But
Absolutely.
that was not that long ago. That was 6 months ago, and I talked about this. I agree with you about the away win. The away game was about grinding out a result. Didn't matter
Correct.
how it happened. Get a win. That's fantastic. Now at home, which is the game you're going to talk about, that's where I was talking about how we have to be more dominant. We have to actually outplay Jamaica and
Correct.
not really squeak by, because Greg Berhalter always managed to win it. Not always, but most of the time he would win at home, squeaking by here
It's
and
the
there,
reality.
1-0. But we
And
wanted a
listen,
dominant.
there's a when you play for the U.S. men's national, or you play in general in CONCACAF, because I've been on both sides. I've played club games, the CONCACAF Champions League back then, now the CONCACAF Champions Cup for Mexican teams, and I played for the U.S. men's national team. The same things are said. The very same things are said. It's like an out of body experience. You just switch the locker rooms. You're hearing the same things, just different perspectives. And it's pretty much when you play in CONCACAF, you steal points on the road and you secure points at home. That is the recipe for success. That is the formula that these coaches go by. Nobody steamrolls and walks through CONCACAF. And I say this because of the complexities of what is CONCACAF, playing away, and people don't want to hear this. And I believe it was Tyler Adams in the first window, after the first window, during Greg Berhalter's tenure, when he spoke about a 9-point window, and I believe the U.S. men's national got, I want to say, 4 points. They got a tie against Canada in Nashville, and they got 3 points in
We
Honduras.
tied El Salvador first, then we tied Canada, then we beat Honduras away. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. That's what it was. So he's talking about a 9-point window, and you come up short. Shortly after, he was criticized for saying, like, "Yo, it's hard playing in CONCACAF. It's easier to play in Europe." And those comments were I believe taken out of context. But what he was referring to were the fields. I mean, you saw the field in Jamaica. I made an offhand joke like there was better grass in the stands than there was on the field. It was a choppy field. The opponents, how physical the games can be, and how refereeing changes from country to country, no matter where you are, how difficult that can be for players. I mean, you saw Christian Pulisic getting kicked a lot. The atmospheres, all these different settings that come into play that make just things difficult. So you got a result. Now you're going home and you want to do what you just said. You want to make it known that you are the home team, that this is your field, that you can impose your will on the opponent. But I think everybody wants to see what Mauricio Pochettino was brought here for. That next level, right? Like, you want to see something that Greg Berhalter didn't show you. You want to see where he can take this team, because in theory, on paper, he's a better coach. So if the problem was the coach, if it wasn't these players, you should see a better team, right? And I think you started seeing things that make you think that body of work is there. The preparation, the idea footballistically of what this team can be is there. Now, Mauricio Pochettino, to his credit, you've only got these players for what? A week at a time for every couple months. It's very difficult to hammer in an idea and get them to do it, yet alone to hammer in multiple ideas and get them to execute. Now, there are things, and I'll get into it in this game, where they could have done better, but let's talk about what they did do well. I mean, you knew, even though Jamaica was in need of a result, they were going to sit, they were going to defend. And maybe that's because your posture pins them in. But in doing so, you have Anthony Robinson, who's in a ridiculous level right now, club and national team form, playing and when I say interior, people are like, well, what does that mean? He's a left back, and all of a sudden he's coming and joining to the midfield, and he's playing in a central position. If you look at Timothy Weah, who was playing on the left-hand side, and I was like, why the hell is Timothy Weah playing on the left-hand side, combines with Anthony Robinson, who's got like literally, back to goal, combines with them, comes inside, hits it off the post, and it's like, why is Timothy Weah playing on the left? Oh my God, he almost scored. It's not, now you're seeing certain ideas that Mauricio Pochettino is implementing into this team. Anthony Robinson, central position. So that means Timothy Weah can stretch the field with the liberty of coming in. But when he's not coming in, Anthony Robinson is in a position where if they lose the ball, Tim Ream, who's not the fastest guy on earth, Mark McKenzie, who's not the greatest in decision-making, isn't left on an island. You've got Yunus Musa on the right, who understands that when Joe Scally overlaps, he's another central midfielder. You've got Christian Pulisic with free reign as a 10, doing what he does. You've got Weston McKennie, who for long stretches of the game, I'm like, I don't know if I like Weston's positioning, gets 2 assists. He's in positions where he can affect the game. Ricardo Pepi in a position where he's going to get opportunity and volume in front of net. So you start seeing these ideas, these patterns of play from the U.S. men's national team, Mauricio Pochettino, that quite frankly give me optimism moving forward because of how much he's done in a short period of time. But then, and he spoke on this, and I'm glad he spoke on this, you've got the U.S. men's national team that we saw against Jamaica in Jamaica that lets their foot off that pedal, off the gas, and allows Jamaica to come back in this game, knowing damn well it's not just about winning. It's about winning by the largest margin possible, because when you go top 4, you want to be first place. You want to play the weakest opponent. And one of the tiebreakers is away goal. You just gave Jamaica 2 away goals that weren't necessary. I mean, the first goal down the right-hand side, Joe Scally looks over his shoulder, sees Damari Gray, and then goes in line with the center backs and forgets about Damari Gray. And Damari Gray wraps around his right shoulder, and a light little delicate flick to the far post. Joe Scally never saw him in the second go around. He lost sight of that. In the second goal, maybe a bit of misfortune, but again, Joe Scally allowing the Jamaican player to dribble into the box and keeps backing up, forces Matt Turner to make a difficult save. Matt can't, because of the angle, parry that wide enough, and maybe a bit of misfortune because it comes off of Anthony Robinson, then right to, I believe it was Damari Gray again, you know? So there are certain things you cannot allow because you're better than the opponent. It's you beating yourself. Concentration, a lack of will, lack of movement, whatever the case may be. You've got to make sure, and to Pochettino's credit, they acknowledge this post game. There are things that they stop doing. You can't put a 60-minute performance in or a 50-minute performance. They have to be complete 90-minute performances. So I'm optimistic of where this is going with this coaching staff because of what they've done and what they've said so far.
Yeah, and to your point here, when we're playing Jamaica and CONCACAF, we talked about how Jamaica has quality for sure, but they continue to be dysfunctional for whatever reason, right? They always find a way to self-implode till a point where one of their best players lost a passport before going to face us.
Two of them.
Okay.
Dixon and Mikel Antonio and lost the passport because a lot of these players are dual nationals, so they've got 2 passports. So explain that one to me, how all of a sudden it gets lost and they can't, find it.
It sounds like one of those cases where my dog ate my homework.
Yeah,
right?
It sounds very fishy. But to what I said earlier, like if you're a Jamaica fan, this must drive you insane, see how much talent you have on paper and how good you can be, and you never seem to put it together.
Well, and what I was saying about that is against Jamaica, you make these mistakes and you kind of get away with it because you're capable of scoring 4 goals. Now you go into a World Cup, that's a game of fine margins. We saw that in 2022. It's like one little goal there against Iran. It's a little mistake against Wales. All of a sudden you're out in the group stage. Right? So you can't make these mistakes. You can't be conceding 2 goals against a team like Jamaica in a World Cup, for example. It's different if you concede 2 goals to an England, to a France, right? Or not.
Better teams are going to capitalize. And I'm so glad you brought that up, Filippo. People to this day still talk about the U.S. men's national team's 2002, the 2002 run for the U.S. men's national team as like the greatest moment in the U.S. soccer on the men's side, right? Think about this for a second. You surprise Portugal, who was, I think a very strong team, one of the favorites in that World Cup because of their generation at the time. And you tie the host country in South Korea. You're sitting pretty. 1 win, 1 tie, okay? And then you get smashed by Poland. You're out of the World Cup if not for South Korea helping you out against Portugal. You were out of the World Cup. You went 1 1-1 in group phase. The same recipe that's always existed for the majority of CONCACAF teams. 1-1. And you go on to the next round to face Mexico, and that's where you win to go on and face Germany. And arguably, should have beat Germany. You had a blown handball, Torsten Frings handball, not called. You were
Greg Berhalter.
Yeah, Greg Berhalter's header. You were a bad call away from a semifinal. That's how thin the margins you're talking about are. So I'm glad you said that, because you're right. Better opposition, the opposition that Greg Berhalter had trouble with, because I believe his away record, or sorry, not away record, I believe his record against top 20 opposition was abysmal. This U.S. men's national team program, those teams that they struggle with are going to hurt you if you allow these things to happen.
Yeah, and the only evidence, or at least the only data we got with Pochettino so far that's a bit encouraging, is we saw a team that didn't do one thing, and well, two things under Berhalter. One, at home, we actually disorganized the opponent with the ball. That's what I saw yesterday when we were watching the game. But we saw a team finally grind out a result away, right?
Yeah.
A lot of adversity. We weren't really playing well in the second half, but we pulled a 1-0 win for whatever that's worth. If there was some luck involved, it wasn't something we were seeing under Berhalter, because we're not going to be the top dogs in the World Cup like we are in CONCACAF. We're not a top 3 in the world. We're not a top 2 in the world, nothing like that. So this team's going to have to find a way to make the opponent work for it, grind a result, find a way to win 1-0. Because in the World Cup, ultimately, what matters is the result. It's not how you play, right? Before the World Cup, you want to judge everything because you're preparing for that. So you're like, are we playing well? Are we improving? Now, when you get to the World Cup, I don't care if we tie everyone 0-0 in the knockout stage and go through on penalty kicks, whatever the strategy is. And at least against Jamaica, for whatever that's worth, again, so no one takes us out of context, saying we're not saying we're going to do well in the World Cup because we beat Jamaica, but there were some encouraging signs this camp of progress. It's slow, but there's progress.
Yeah, and also self-awareness, I think, is important here. Mauricio Pochettino comes into the program and he's like, listen, I want this team to be like a South Korea or a Morocco. South Korea made a ridiculous run. Some would say the officiating helped back in 2002, but they made a ridiculous run into the semifinals. Morocco made a ridiculous run, a road that I've never seen in the World Cup, where they played a World Cup runner-up in their group, a golden generation in Belgium, and the CONCACAF champion in Canada. And they get out of the group to face, I believe,
Herc, don't call them CONCACAF champions. Don't call that.
Well, they were CONCACAF champions in the World Cup cycle. So
they finished first in World Cup qualifying. They're the pre-World Cup CONCACAF number 1 seed. That's what they're not the CONCACAF champions.
Who did Morocco play next?
They play Portugal or Spain?
Portugal, France, and then Croatia in the third place game. Now, people are going to be like, what an amazing run, and it is. And people are going to be like, that's what you got to play like, and I'll be like, whew. Like, okay, if you can do that as a U.S. men's national team, you can't be giving up goals like they gave up against Jamaica, because Morocco would defend. Some would say they hung 10 guys on the crossbar, and defended for their life, oftentimes on a counter, or one set piece, and that was their goal, and they defended tooth and nail like their life depended on it to grind out a result. I think it's the mentality that Pochettino is talking about, and I agree with it. Like, that Morocco team wasn't pretty. You go back and watch those games, most would say it's like anti-football, but damn, was it effective. They got what they needed against high-quality teams. So can you be that mentally? Can you have that mindset of, we're not getting beat today? And if you could do that with the players that the U.S. have going forward, you can be a Morocco. You can be a South Korea. You can have one of these runs. Nobody's saying the U.S. is going to win a World Cup. Pochettino's not saying that either. He's saying we could be a good team in a World Cup. We can make a run. And I firmly believe that. But you can't make these mistakes.
Now, before we close this episode, to what you just said, wasn't the United States like that in the past? Like, we didn't have maybe the quality that we have today, but the mindset and the grind. Because, I mean, making it to the Confederations Cup final in 2009, I know the Confederations Cup was never a World Cup, but beating that Spain takes a different mentality from a team that's much worse.
But I go back to margins. Like, a lot of this is fortune as well. Like, that 2009 team was a great team, Landon, Clint, you had great,
Josie was good too at the
yeah,
time.
Carlos Bocanegra, Josie, Michael Bradley. Like, you had really good players, Tim Howard in really good moments. And they got smashed versus Italy,
Hmm.
right? Like they went in because they beat Egypt. That's how the Confederations Cup works. It's like it wasn't like the World Cup or a Copa America. You win your group, quarters, semis type of deal, and then they beat Spain. That's the game. You beat Spain. The one game you're not supposed to win, you win. That Spanish national team that had a 35-game unbeaten streak, you beat them. I believe it was Clint and Josie end up scoring goals. And you go off to play against Brazil. And to their credit, with the confidence they had, they were up 2-0 at halftime.
Hmm.
They were up 2-0 at halftime. So go back to what you said about the margins. Like, people forget about these things. That's what football is about. And that's why learning from things like last night or a few nights ago playing against Jamaica at home and letting your foot off the gas, not being concentrated in those moments, that's why better teams will punish you and put you away.
The Dutch game in the 2022 World Cup.
There you go.